bad-based spooky friends, and welcome to the Scarish Podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace, and this is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And we're here to bring you an actually, I think it's going to be a pretty large episode.
I think so, too. I have a very long script, although I do have a very short email this time, so hopefully it won't go that long, but I know that you guys like the long episodes, so that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Cool.
So what topic did you pick this week, Robin?
I picked the Pontefract Poltergeist.
I'm usually the one that does the Poltergeist, so I'm very happy to hear that you're venturing into the scary territory.
I do scary stuff.
You do, but this Poltergeist freaked me out, so I think that's why I like to do them, because I like to confront it. This week, I picked Changelings, so I'm really excited to do mine. I started digging into it.
That makes sense why yours is long now.
Yeah, I knew there would be a lot on it, and then I found more, and I found more, and I found more, and this rabbit hole goes deep.
We could have just done multiple episodes about Changelings.
Well, I can probably still do Changelings, because this one is mainly background, and then one very specific example.
Okay.
So I can always just do it again later, but yeah, I'm going to start out the Changeling saga this episode 45.
Okay.
So, fun stuff. But yeah, let's get to the homegrown horrors section first.
Let's have you go first because yours is short.
Okay. Before I start, just to let you guys know, homegrown horrors are paranormal experiences that you've experienced or your family's told you about or you just want to share with us. And you can reach out to storytime@scaryish.com if you want to send us an email with that. Facebook.com/scaryish podcast is the best place to reach us on Facebook. You can just message us directly there. You can also join the group, which is the Scarish Spooky Friends group, and post there if you want some instant feedback. You can also join our Discord. Best way to do that, go to scarish.com. It's on the right-hand side. And then you can tweet at us if your story is 280 characters or shorter, which I doubt it will be. So just give us a shout out on Twitter. Be like, hey, sup? Or if you want to just show us a bunch of pictures, you can go to Instagram, and that's at scarishpod.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what our Twitter handle is as well, ScarishPod. So.
No, it's Scarish Podcast on Instagram.
Okay, and then on Twitter is at ScarishPod. Our naming convention is absolutely terrible because we just I hate us so much. But let's go ahead and get into the first one. This one was actually sent to us on Facebook by Cheyenne, and it's very short, and it starts out like this. I found you guys on Spotify. Shout out Spotify. And it's great because I've only found one other podcast of scary stories that I really liked. I do have a story to share if you want it. Absolutely. I mean, it's not like I can email them back and be like, no. But yeah, we always want your stories, so send them on in. Short, long, whatever the case may be. For context, my grandfather died a week after I was born, and he only held me once. When I was either 2 or 3, my mom came into my room and I was talking to someone. She asked who I was talking to, and I said it was my grandfather. Ever since she told me that, I've always felt a special connection to him, even though I've never really met him.
That's really cool.
It is really cool. It's very short, but it's very
short
sweet.
And sweet. Yeah,
it's
right
very appropriate. So I'm glad you have that connection with your grandfather. I lost my grandfather when I was in 7th grade, and it stinks because my grandfather only spoke Spanish, and I never learned enough to have a full-blown conversation with him. So, cool. But I always felt like a connection with my grandfather. I was always a performer. It's shocking, I have a podcast as an adult. But
Are you a performer though?
Well, as a kid, I would dance and sing and do silly stuff.
Oh,
and
okay.
My grandfather would sing, and I'd be dancing around, and he'd be giggling. So that's what I remember about my grandfather.
I used to randomly just sing the Gilligan Island theme song.
Do you know both verses or just the first one?
I think I used to sing the entire song. My mom said I used to, because I was 3 years old, and my mom said I used to sing the entire song.
I imagine if I ever went to cruise with you, you'd start singing it, and it would make me very paranoid. So
yeah. It's always just a 3-hour tour.
It is. That's what they always say. Yeah. So what do you got for us, Robin?
Okay, so this one's from Kyle, and it goes, okay, here we go.
Wow, just jumping right into it.
When I was younger, my mom took my sister and I to Pennsylvania to meet my grandpa for the first time. What? Grandpa stories? That's kind of cool.
Yeah, back to back.
What are the odds?
It was probably something from 2 months ago. We had an episode where we talked about some grandpa stories, and people were like, I'm going to email about my grandpa.
All right. I was about 7 and my sister was 10. The visit was awesome. I had lots of fun there, but something strange and creepy happened. One day, my mom took my sister and I to a park next to the 3-story building that looked abandoned but not old. Immediately, my sister ran to the swings and asked my mom to push her, which my mom couldn't say no to. I, on the other hand, was drawn to the seesaw. While running there, I noticed a girl with a white dress on.
Uh-oh. Ghost. Dead
right?
person. It's not a real person. Run away.
I can remember and visualize now how white the dress was. It sort of glowed. She told me her name was Church. We played on...
Take me to church. Derp and derp, derp and derp. Sorry. Keep going.
We played on the seesaw for a long time. Church seemed to stop losing interest in it and told me she knew a cool place to play hide and seek. I don't like where this is going.
It's a graveyard.
I followed her to the abandoned building.
That's great.
She led me to a broken window, which looked like it was a small drop down to the basement floor.
I mean, basements are a good sign in abandoned buildings, right?
Always, yeah. Uh-huh.
This is very wholesome. I like this one.
Oh, right.
She's going to go down there and it's going to be like Gushers and High C.
Oh my gosh, I want Gushers so bad.
I know,
saw Gushers
so
the other
good.
day and now I'm just like, Gushers! Church climbed down into the very dark basement and motioned me to follow her with a smile.
And I left her there.
I remember being very hesitant, but decided that I was going. I put one foot into the window and was immediately snatched up to my feet. Oh my gosh.
What the
okay.
fuck? So
no,
something reached up and grabbed?
It was my mom pulling me out the window. Oh my God, I would have freaked out. She asked what I was doing and I told her playing with Church. My mom looks around and down into the window. She gets up and looks at me and asks, "Why are you acting like this? I've seen you on the seesaw alone talking."
Wow. Oh my God, that's so creepy.
Right? Alone, I still wonder what would have happened if I climbed into the window that day.
Maybe you would have discovered her body.
Dude, do you like that animation of the kids on Halloween where it's like a little boy in his little Halloween costume and he's like by himself, but then he sees like this little other little girl who has like a little her Halloween costume on, but her Halloween bucket like has no candy in it, so they like share.
I've never seen this. I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's so good. I don't know. Someone posted it to the Scarish Spooky Friends group. I'm surprised you haven't seen it.
Yeah, I
It's
don't
really
remember this
good.
ever being posted. That's crazy.
It's really good. You should watch it sometime.
Yeah, clearly.
But yeah, so that is from Kyle. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sending that in. We really appreciate it. So if you guys want to send yours in, again, just email storytime@scarish.com or any of the other social media outlets that we have. And then when we have the full-blown episodes where we read 6 of your guys' stories or more, we do those on Wednesdays live at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on twitch.tv/scarishpodcast or youtube.com/scarish. So check us out there if you want to watch us record those live. Otherwise, you can just listen to them like normal. So
Yeah,
that also works.
We post them on YouTube and stuff so you can watch later.
Very true.
Yeah.
So we should probably announce it now. Actually, we're going to be doing the Halloween episode on Tuesday, October 30th.
Yes.
The day before Halloween. Halloween is very busy for us, and it's also Robin's birthday. So we'll be recording that episode live Tuesday, October 30th, and I believe it's going to be 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So it's a little bit later, but that's just how the scheduling is going to work out.
Yep.
So come out and watch it. That'll be the Halloween Spooktacular. I don't know what we're going to do
It's not
special.
gonna be very spooktacular.
I mean, it's going to be like a normal episode, but I'm sure we'll have at least one special thing for you guys yet to be determined that we'll do on the live episode. So
cool.
Fun stuff. But who's going to start the topics? Is it going to be you or is it going to be me?
I'll go first because mine is short.
Short or shorter?
Shorter.
Okay, go right ahead. And you're doing what again? The Poltergeist from when?
Yeah, I'll get into it.
Okay.
To continue this Spooptober thing, I'm doing a Poltergeist, and I guess, yes, I don't really do super scary stuff all the time. I do a lot of, weird monsters and different places that
Sometimes
I think are
you do
weird.
some scary stuff.
But I thought this was pretty interesting. It's the haunting of a home on number 30 East Drive, Checkerfield Estate in Pontefract.
I love it when you have the exact address and it's just like, okay, that makes it very, very real. Like this place is a place you can go to.
Yeah, it's actually very real. It's supposedly supposed to be one of the most violent hauntings in Europe, but I don't believe it.
I feel like that's what they say about literally every haunting.
Yeah.
Every haunting is always, or every house is the most haunted house.
It's a pretty big thing to claim when there are so many places that
It's just there's no way to quantifiably measure that unless like there's like an actual PKE meter that Egon Spangler can go in there and measure it and be like, this is the exact number it
Dude,
was. That's not a good Egon Spangler impression.
I saw a shirt at Target the other day, and it was like a costume of like the Ghostbusters. It was like a t-shirt that had the costume, and it said, I think it actually did say Egon on it.
Really? I love that in Stranger Things season 2, everyone argues over who gets to be Peter Venkman, because that's like the character everyone wanted to be. And it's like, oh, we thought you were going to be Winston. The kid's like, why did you think that? It's so fucking funny.
It's good. But yeah, so this house is actually home to a malevolent spirit that goes by the name of Fred or the Black Monk.
No, Fred's way scarier than the Black Monk.
Sometimes it's even been called Mr. Nobody.
That's creepy.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
So it's confusing to me, though, because it's like, make up your minds. What name do you want to name it? It's like you're trying to make this very creepy ghost and market it, but you're like Let us call it a million different things first.
Well, I mean, is it someone naming it, or is it Fred naming himself?
Fred does not name himself.
Well, that's really dumb then. Pick a name and stick with it, people.
There's even supposedly a picture that's surfaced in recent times, like 2 or 3 years recent, of a figure of like a friar-looking person in a mirror. And it's actually kind of weird looking because you can see the shadow looking. It's very vintage. It's like a vintage photo looking figure in this mirror.
From recently, from like 2 or 3 years ago.
For like 2016.
And it's a shadow.
And it's like a shadow looking thing, but you can tell it kind of looks like a friar.
Does it know what evil lurks in the hearts of men?
I don't get it.
There's a movie called The Shadow, which is based off like, I think, a radio show.
Oh, I only know the movie with Johnny Depp.
No, this is like an Alec Baldwin flick. It came out like the same time as The Phantom, when The Phantom came out with Billy Zane. Nothing ringing a bell. Okay, let's keep going.
All right.
Apparently I'm old. Fuck you.
Dude, it's so funny because we were talking at work today. Sorry, another tangent. But we were talking at work today because everyone I work with is a lot older than me. You know what I mean? Because I'm just an intern, so I'm like a little kid in comparison. But I was talking to my coworkers, and one of them was like, yes, I get it. My textbook is from like 1991.
I was 6, which means you were 2.
And that was their college textbook,
wow.
You know? And so I was just like, oh my God.
It's like they used an abacus instead of a calculator.
I had to tell them, like, it's hard to believe you sometimes when you say things like that, because it's like, I can't believe that you were in college. You know what I mean?
I called someone that was 70 years old. And my mom was like, that's not old. I'm like, my bad, dog. Like, I didn't mean to offend.
That's so freaking funny.
I didn't call this 70-year-old old person old to their face. I was talking about them behind their back,
okay.
like a decent human being.
Oh, you're still shitty. Anyway.
I hate you so much.
Okay. So there have been quite a few different stories about the origin of the Black Monk and where it actually came from. Where the Black Monk name came from is because he's appeared as an apparition dressed in long black robes, and one of the most popular explanations is that there was a Cluniac monk that was hanged across the street for the rape and murder of a young girl. And his body was...
That doesn't sound very monk-like.
Supposedly, his body was then discarded down the well that sits under 30 East Drive. And there are other theories that point to there never having had monks in the area, and that the name is simply just having to do with his appearance. They should have just named him Luke Skywalker, I think.
hate you.
Because like in The Last Jedi, he's always moping around in his robes. And just like,
is
you know what I mean?
Is he raping people too?
No,
I don't think that happens. I know there's a lot of deleted scenes in The Last Jedi.
But he's walking around this area all mopey with his robes on like a monk. You know what I mean? All by himself.
Well, no one had seen Last Jedi yet, so no one had been disappointed. I'm just kidding. Don't hate mail me if you're a huge fan of Last Jedi.
I like Last Jedi. I thought
it was all right. I didn't think it was a 9.7 out of 10, but I thought it was all right.
I don't think the blue milk out of that
alien titty.
Yeah, it was unnecessary.
It was weird. Yeah, I was just like, that's
But
odd.
the way he fished was awesome.
Yeah, that was super cool. There's a lot of stuff in it that I like. There's a lot of stuff in it that I didn't like, but whatever. That's just a movie for you. It didn't change my life.
Okay. There's apparently one researcher, though, that thinks Fred is somehow the twin of a murderer that was blamed for his brother's evil stuff.
That would suck so bad.
Now he wants revenge.
I would too. Fuck that.
Vengeance demons. They're the worst, am I right?
Is he a demon or is he a spirit? What, is that a reference to something?
To Buffy, because Anya's the vengeance demon.
I always forget that Anya was a demon before.
Yeah, she was a vengeance demon.
Xander
Sorry,
started
Anya.
banging her.
If you guys haven't watched Buffy, you guys need to go watch Buffy. It's
you don't
awesome.
have to watch Buffy.
No.
I've been dragging it out for years.
Yeah. It's been, 6 years?
Yeah, and have we watched the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie?
Have you tried to make me watch it?
I've complained at you for not watching it. Isn't that enough?
It's never going to happen.
Well, that's great. Keep going.
There's a research group that actually looked into it and concludes that Philip was a lying teenager and faked the entire haunting.
Wow.
So it just depends. You know what I mean? Like, what do you want to believe?
So who the fuck is Philip?
Oh, let's get into that. So... this particular haunting revolves around the Pritchard family, and they moved into this home in the August of 1966, just hoping to have a home, Like, just a nice house to live in with the family, doing all that fun
Like
stuff.
anyone who's like moving into a place.
Right. Little did they know it'd be a nightmare soon enough.
I hate you so much. Although I love the phrase, little did you know.
The first incident experienced within the home was actually when the parents, Jean and Joe Pritchard, were out on a short holiday. I like to say holiday because, that's
Instead
what
of
they say.
vacation.
Right.
Do you put a U in everything that you spell that has an O in it as well?
No, dude, but when I was younger,
Color.
I used to spell color like that.
You're an asshole.
And I used to get marked wrong all the time.
Someone in my D&D group is a Brit, and it was funny because they were telling us about a birthday card that they had gotten in the office, and
Yeah.
like everyone had signed it, and one of their friends in the office put the letter U in every single word, and they wrote like a paragraph about how they're really good friends, and they're glad they had met him, and blah, 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 but they put the letter U excessively in everything because they always complained about how like in the UK you guys spell everything with an unnecessary U.
So they went on a short holiday, and it was their teenage son, Philip, who was 15, and his grandmother who witnessed it. So, the first thing that to happen in this home that make them freak out was Philip alone with his grandmother, probably torturing her. Like, oh, hey, let me scare you real quick,
But
Grandma.
the grandmother said that they saw something too?
Yeah.
Okay, get into that part, because now I'm curious,
So-
because if Philip's full of shit, then it sounds like Grandma's full of shit too.
It was a fairly small, harmless event, but strange all the same. Some dust randomly fell as if from mid-air and was all over every surface.
It's like when you bump a fan and all of a sudden all
But-
the dust falls down.
They were both like, yo, dog, that shit came from nowhere. We swear.
Was there a vent
Like,
in
it
the room?
didn't come from the ceiling. It came from shoulder height.
Do you think maybe, just maybe, like it's all timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly, and it's actually the ghost of LeBron James, and instead of shaking the baby powder in his hand and throwing it up in the air, it's just dust because that's all he has, and he just like threw it up in the air?
I don't think so.
Okay, yeah, probably not, but
Yeah.
that's just my best theory so far.
Yeah, it didn't come from the ceiling. They swear that it came from shoulder height and just fell down. And I don't know how you could tell the difference.
I don't either. I don't
So-
understand how Philip, or why Philip would fake something so weird.
Because he's 15.
Okay, I was 15, but I was way better at pulling pranks, just saying.
I was 15 and very sheltered and did not pull pranks. I don't know how to
So
do
we're
that.
the opposite ends of the spectrum. So apparently Philip lies somewhere between those 2 points.
Okay, so they called Philip's aunt over to help clean up the dirt. And when she came over, she pounded
She pounded the
She
shit.
found a puddle of water on the floor, and the puddle of water was never ending. So she'd clean it up, and right before her eyes, it would literally appear again.
This could solve a lot of problems in, say, Africa, if this is real. I'm just saying.
It's weird because it wasn't like they would walk away, clean it up, walk away, and it would appear again like it was dripping. You know what I mean? It just
Right.
like
It would just
it's
be
like
there.
It filled back up again. And this was only the beginning to things that were strange.
You love your transitions so much. You have a transition voice that you use whenever
Oh,
you
I
hit
do?
them.
All right.
Just
good to
listen
know.
for it.
Phenomena that followed included lights going on and off, their tea dispenser activating on its own because, everyone has their own little tea dispenser.
Right.
Well, they're in the UK. I don't know. Maybe. Cupboards shook and plants jumped, quote unquote, jumped out of their pots. Items.
Sounds like a really bad Super Mario level. Is this mansion Luigi's mansion, perhaps?
Maybe. And maybe it's Luigi that hung himself there.
Yeah, fan theory. Go check that out.
Okay. Objects would float and move on their own, and photographs were quote unquote slashed by invisible knives.
How did they know? Did
or
they
blades.
look at that photograph?
I'm sure every time they did, it made them.
Cry, probably.
Oh yeah, I was
Like
gonna
every
say
time
laugh, and then I was like, wait,
That was
that
the
doesn't make
lyric.
sense.
Yeah, but yeah. That's what happens every time I hear the song Photoback. Photograph by Nickelback. It's late. Fuck you.
I know it is very late. We're so sorry. Anyway, a set of keys has even been dropped down the chimney. So
No human being could drop keys like this.
unattended keys end up in weird places.
That just sounds like a clumsy or forgetful person.
It's ended up in weird places that don't make sense, apparently. I don't know. Like inside of objects that don't make sense.
Like a cat or like a freezer?
Like vacuums, but it didn't get sucked up in the vacuum. This is what I'm reading on the internet, okay? Like it ends up in the vacuum, but the vacuum doesn't work. So how does it end up in there?
Ooh.
That's what the internet said.
It just sounds like
okay?
someone's playing pranks and putting shit all
Yeah,
over the
sounds like a
house.
15-year-old dickhead.
You're absolutely right. 15-year-old dickhead. Robin's
Anyway.
assessment of the poltergeist.
Anyway, so the kitchen gets tossed up as well. Rooms just get like wrecked. The gross part for me is green foam coming out of taps and toilets.
That's really gross.
Yeah.
That's something that's hard to have a 15-year-old fake.
It sounds just like a really bad plumbing problem. They have water showing up places.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
Weird stuff coming out of their toilets and taps. But whatever you want to believe, you do that.
Keep going. Let's see. I'm forming my opinion as we speak.
Despite waking up to the entity standing in their room, Jean, the mom, never wanted to give up and run. And she called this priest over to come in and help. And Fred, the black monk, was not having it. Anytime they tried to do anything, he just got pissed off. The exorcisms were not working on him. During the exorcism, holy water would appear to be seeping from the walls. And how they knew it was holy water without having demons to test it on is beyond me.
I was going to say, how the hell would you know that's holy water?
I don't know. Maybe one of them is a demon.
They just walk up to it and burn them. They're like, oh, holy water, son of a bitch. Sorry about that, Spike.
Spike.
Buffy reference. Suck it.
Oh, I was thinking more supernatural demons, not...
Well, I went to a different place.
Yeah. Okay. I'm like, wait, this is all... I'm trying to remember if holy water affects vampires, but it does, doesn't it?
It does in certain things, but I don't know. It's just there's so many iterations of vampires out there, and you've made me watch so many bad ones. It's hard to keep the rules straight. Does holy water work on the Twilight vampires?
I don't know. They
don't
deal with exorcisms there.
Burst into flames. I hate that series so much. Keep going.
They can't burst into flames. They're made of like crystal.
That's such your shit.
Okay. Well, I guess you can burn them, but we're not getting into the Twilight thing right now. It's probably just to be theatrical, them being like, it's holy water coming out of the walls. You know what I mean?
It's just like to amp up the detail. Yeah.
To market it, I think is the big thing. Clergymen would have their faces slapped and were supposedly pushed by ghost hands that would appear to float in the air.
It sounds like Phantom Fists.
And, well, what's ridiculous is that it seemed to, quote-unquote, conduct the exorcism hymns like a conductor would with music.
That's funny.
And I just imagine the master hands, like from Super Smash.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing, too.
Shit. And that's just ridiculous. Like, no, not for me. And everything was fairly harmless at first. More mischievous, if anything. It's
right. It's not like malevolent at this point.
I just can't believe that some of this shit is so ridiculous. Like, would you really think, like, hey, there's floating hands conducting the orchestra of exorcism?
So that's the thing, too. That's the oddest thing about stories like this, is that sometimes everything that fits into a particular niche could be bullshit. And then when you have details that go outside the norm that just seem absurd, that could be the truth. You know what I mean? Like, it could just be that it's more absurd than it is terrifying.
Right.
And when you tell people, you're like, phantom hands, like conducting, yeah, whatever, bro.
And then there's one instance where it's said that Fred poured a full jug of milk over the head of a disbelieving relative of the Pritchards.
Wow. That's like that scene from Necessary Roughness where he buys the guy a beer and then the guy pours it on his head.
Really?
Yeah, he buys him a beer. He's like, here you go. It's on me. And then he takes the beer and he pours it over his head. He goes, now it's on you.
What the fuck?
They're probably watching that movie and the ghost is probably like, yeah, I like that.
I don't think that movie was out back then.
Necessary Roughness is fucking awesome. You should watch it. Scott Bakula. He's the best.
The guy from Quantum Leap?
Yep.
All right. Okay. Philip and his younger sister, Diane, who was 12, were thoroughly amused at the whole milk dumping
I would
thing.
laugh my ass off. I don't think I would be that scared of this haunting. I'd be more like, oh, Fred.
Over time, though, shit got real, as poltergeists usually do.
I was going to say, this doesn't sound very poltergeisty yet.
Fred decided that he wanted to torture Diane, the little kid, and she often had scrapes and bruises as a result. During one instance, Diane was grabbed by her hair and violently dragged up backwards on the stairs,
That's fucking
kicking and
scary.
screaming.
Those are the scariest parts of those Paranormal Activity movies, when that fucking activity amps up enough where they can just grab people and drag them like unseen.
Yeah.
That's like freaky shit.
Yeah. Anytime there's physical contact between an invisible force, it's like, what is going on?
Right.
And that's just a dickhead thing to do. It really is. It's like you were totally fine doing stupid stuff, and then you're like, hold on, let me make this a million times worse.
I wonder if just the negative energy that gets fed into things when people are like freaked out about it, like makes it become, like it exacerbates the behavior.
That's the whole thing with poltergeists, is they feed off of negative energy.
Right.
And it said the relationship between the dad and the son was bad, and it kind of created like a...
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. Power suck. I don't know.
power
I don't know
suck?
what to call it.
That sounds hot.
Ew.
Bring that poltergeist to my place.
Gross. Isn't there a movie where someone gets something like that? I don't know. Let's not go there.
It's Ghostbusters.
Okay.
There's a ghost blowjob in that movie. For those of
So-
you who were too young to realize it, that's what's happening to Ray when he has that dream.
Okay. The photo of the black monk that I referenced earlier at the beginning, where someone actually took a picture in the mirror, that mirror is actually in the hallway that is supposed to be where she actually got dragged up the stairs. So it's in that area.
So that area is like has activity focused around it.
Right.
Okay.
And then after being dragged, there was evidence of fingers wrapped around her throat, like the shape of the hands started showing up.
That is super creepy.
Yeah, super creepy. Even though she was supposedly pulled by her hair, it doesn't make any sense.
I was gonna say, yeah, those details don't exactly match, but
Yeah, believe what you want to believe.
one hand on the hair, one hand on the throat. That's like, I don't know.
Sounds weird.
It's possible. I know that really got weird really
Yeah.
fast. And some of you guys were like, yes.
She's
and that,
12.
So, yeah, okay, I'll stop there.
Okay, so anyway, it obviously left her absolutely traumatized. I don't know what Fred really had against Diane, but her room has been totally destroyed before, and it gets destroyed and trashed around 4 a.m. on occasion when the house is unoccupied. And then it makes you kind of think like that hanging of that monk because of the rape of the young girl. It's like he's this weirdo pedo perv.
Right. I wonder, and this is just the skeptic in me, if those details were like developed about the backstory of the ghost after things started happening to the 12-year-old girl.
Oh, maybe.
Because it's like, you probably wouldn't realize like, oh, it's a monk who is like, arrested and then hung for rape. And then that starts happening to the girl. I just feel like the nature of these stories is like you develop these details based off the behavior.
Right.
So who knows?
Well, the official site says a whole bunch of stuff about paranormal activities and events. And it seems like there are a few people who visit that haven't had something happen to them while there. And it kind of makes me think like maybe there's no way that something could happen every single time. It's like you have to put like traps and stuff that'll happen. Like wasn't there a movie that we watched recently where they did that, where they set up traps to make it sound like there's ghosts or
I don't know.
It's
not ringing a bell.
But I'm sure that they had to do something like that within that house to make it seem like everybody has something happen.
Right.
Mostly things that mostly happen are like foul odors, stinky smells, maybe sulfur, probably.
Right.
Voices, they hear voices, and then the typical physical hinky-jinky.
Hinky-jinky? What is that?
So like touching, pushing, slapping, stuff like that.
Yeah, tell me more.
Ew, shut up. Some have seen like paranormal lights, like unexplained lights, nausea, but that could absolutely be anything. You could be nervous and get nauseous.
Right.
And shadow figures. And apparently dirt isn't the only thing that Fred likes to drop around out of thin air. Marbles seem to appear too.
That's
just
weird.
Drop out of thin air. I don't know why. And are found in weird places. I don't personally believe this, but visitors have said that they've had marbles appear at their homes after leaving the residence.
That's creepy that it would follow you home.
Yeah.
And I don't know, if that's a detail that's in there, that makes it harder to believe that it is a kid that's playing a prank, because that would be just like such an extra step to try and go to follow someone home and place a marble in their house.
Well, isn't it like poltergeists haunt people, not homes?
Yeah, typically they're attached. I don't know, actually. Sometimes it's to a home and sometimes it's to a person. I think the demonic hauntings, those ones are the ones that are attached to a person specifically, but a lot of cases of poltergeists will be attached to an actual place versus a person.
All I'm thinking in my head right now is, this house is clear.
This house is clear.
Anyway, sorry. Neighbors have even reported seeing a shadow figure out in the gardens and have had strange activity happen in their own homes. So I think maybe it's the area and not just that house.
Right. I don't know. It's weird because it could just be like group paranoia. But at the same time, it's like I've never heard of a free-range ghost or spirit that could just go from like house to house and just fuck with people.
But if it was underneath that house, if the well is underneath that house, it could be not just that house, but that whole area is haunted.
It could be. It could also be bullshit, but it could be. Yeah.
So there seems to be more than just Fred living in that residence, apparently, say certain psychics and stuff like that, obviously. And
I feel like every time you bring a psychic in, they're like, no, there's like 50 ghosts here.
well, this it said that a young girl, a boy, and I guess some elemental spirit is also there. And
Elemental spirit?
I just imagine elementals from like WoW, World of Warcraft.
I was going to say,
or
is it a water elemental, or are we talking
like
an
Bravely
infernal?
Default, when they have that one stage you have to fight all the water elemental.
I don't think I got
things.
there.
Oh, okay.
You got much further in that game than I did.
Yeah, I just imagine like watery figures.
Yeah,
you know?
that's what I see too.
There's speculation that the elemental is the mastermind behind it all.
The elemental is. Maybe
yeah.
it's an old god from World of Warcraft. I know way too much lore about that game to be proud of it.
Okay.
But I am. So suck it.
Nerd. Anyway, there's actually a movie called When the Lights Went Out.
Of course there is.
That came out in the UK in 2012 that is loosely based on this particular ghostie. And it has a 4.5 out of 10 on Rotten Tomatoes.
Pretty bad.
So, yeah, I don't know if it's
I've
actually
heard
good.
of worse things, but that's pretty bad.
I think the movie that I said last time had like a 3.
Really?
Yeah, the
That's
one about
atrocious.
Robert the doll had like a 3.
Side note, I made Robin watch Game Night, and I thoroughly enjoyed it when I watched it the first time.
That movie is amazing.
And she really liked it. I really was happy I was rewatching it, too. So if you haven't seen Game Night, check it out. It's fun. It's just a fun movie. It's funny,
so
too.
Funny.
It's well shot.
I was laughing. I was literally laughing out loud at certain parts.
It gets kind of cheesy at the end, but then like they kind of make reference to how absurd it is.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, you know what? I'm kind of okay with it. The fact that they're like, this is fucking ridiculous. That's not just like, you know what? It just works. So
yeah, it's a good movie.
And side note.
So the Pritchards left the home in the 70s, and a man named Bill Bungie, I think that's how you pronounce his name, now owns the house and was the producer who made When the Lights Went Out.
Shocker.
Right? He didn't really believe in Fred at first, but now that he's experienced strange things himself, he's changed his opinion.
Now that he has a movie.
Supposedly.
Yeah, now that he has a movie attached to something about Fred, he 100% believes it.
And Bill apparently doesn't even live there. Carol, who lives next door, is the current caretaker, who is in her 50s, I think. And you can now visit the home, but they don't recommend staying overnight. The website states that it's not a traditional B&B, and the visitors are not covered by any insurance. So what goes, goes, and you're effed in the B.
Wow.
So, unfortunately, the waiting list is long, and the house is booked up to a year in advance.
Wow.
So you might want to, plan your life accordingly. All visitors must also sign a liability waiver.
It's like when you go to one of those places that serves really hot wings, and you have to sign a waiver before you eat the atomic blazing wings. It'll blow out your butthole.
It'll blow out your butthole. You're funny. And alcohol and Ouija boards are banned. They're forbidden from being on property.
I appreciate that at least.
It's also requested that no one attempt exorcisms while they're there because they don't want to piss off the ghost.
Right.
Or poltergeist, whatever. And some of the rules are supposedly requests from Fred, apparently.
How do they know that? Does he talk?
Maybe he gets pissed if you do something, and so you're like, let's change this and see if he gets pissed.
Maybe he's really happy and he's celebrating, but he's really obnoxious, so it seems like he's mad.
Quite possibly.
Yeah.
So things like not plugging in the kettle, but making sure it's filled when not used, and to show Fred some respect. Those are some rules.
How do you show Fred respect? If he's a rapist, he can suck a dick.
I'm sure saying things like that is not the way to go.
I would go in there with both middle fingers out and be like, Fred, if you're real, you can suck a dick.
Let's not.
Someone take this podcast to that place and hit play.
I am good with
at this part.
You guys don't do
Robin
that.
Grace says, suck a dick.
No, it's not funny.
It's hilarious.
No, it's not. I will hurt you. Either way, the whole Fred making the rules thing sounds like bullshit to me. But,
But you're still willing to violently strike me?
Yeah, because what if it isn't bullshit?
Then it's a rapist ghost that can suck a dick.
And then he kills you.
Or
tortures you and traumatizes
I'm not going
you.
over there. I'm not going over there.
Yeah, what if you have bad luck forever?
I don't think that's how these things work.
You don't know that. Do you control the spirit world?
No, but I mean, I do a lot of research on it, and I haven't seen anything about a podcaster getting murdered or having terrible luck. I've had such bad luck lately.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what curse did I bring upon myself?
Bonus titty bitties. Pontefract Castle is near here, and King Richard II is said to have died there. I think he actually got murdered. There was big battle things. He got murdered there. But yeah, King Ghosty Goodies.
Wow. So that's just a ghosty goodie because it's nearby?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're not even related.
No. It's just the Pontefract castle is nearby, and a king actually got fucking murdered there. A lot of people got murdered there, so there might be ghosts there too.
Cool. That's fun.
Yeah.
Good times.
All right.
And
yeah.
Is that it?
Yep.
That was good.
Yeah. The Black Monk of Pontefract.
Well, hopefully it's not real, and if it is, it sounds like a horrible, wretched ghost of a horrible, wretched human being. So, fun stuff. I do want to take a quick break before I get to my topic to give a shout out to our sponsor yet again, Modern Physics. If you want to check out their products, you can go to modernphysics.com. Physics is spelled F-I-Z-Z-I-X because it's fun. It's bath bombs and stuff like that. It's fizz, it's foam, whatever. It's fun. But if you guys want to go check that out, there's something very special because the owner of Modern Physics is a very nice human being. They reached out to us. They said they wanted to sponsor us again. And they also created a scarish-themed bath bomb. It has our logo on the front. It will have a different color inside each time, but the scent is always going to be the same. They let Robin and I pick what the scent is. We're not going to spoil it, but it is one of our favorite cereals. So,
oh my gosh.
Super excited about that. Can't wait to get some. And if you use the promo code BASEMENT, you can actually get 30% off your order. So don't just go over there and just pick up a scarish one. Check out all the other stuff there.
They have a black one.
They have a completely black one that I want to try out.
I really want to try it.
So much stuff over there. And with the promo code BASEMENT, you can get 30% off. So you might as well just stock up on them. And they decided they wanted to sponsor us for a while here because we have the holiday season coming up. We have the Halloween season hitting us right now. So there's plenty of time for you guys to go and take care of that. But go do it right now. And give it a shot. Let us know how much you enjoyed it because I'm super excited that they're sponsoring us again. They're wonderful human beings. They really, really are. So check that stuff out.
Get that spooky bath bomb for yourself. Soak in the darkness that is your soul.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah.
Scary. And the description of that item is totally a quote straight out of Ghostbusters. So I just really...
For the scariest one?
Yeah. I just super appreciate that. Just goes straight to my heart. So awesome. Thank you so much, Modern Physics, for sponsoring us again. We really, really appreciate you guys. And it's a really good story, too, because we posted about it. We said, like, hey, guys, here's the product that's going live. And I kind of posted that too early because the promo code wasn't going live until later on. And they said, it's okay. We're just going to make it live early because that's the kind of people they are. So the fact that they're willing to take care of not just our audience, but just people in general, that gives you an idea of the kind of company you're dealing with. So totally throw them your business. I am 100% supportive of that.
Cool.
So I'm going to move on into my topic, and this week I had a very specific idea in mind, and for once I did not change what I was doing mid-research, because that happens to me a lot when I'm like, I'm going to do this one this week, and then I just get distracted like by a butterfly. And this particular topic was actually inspired by a listener story that sort of stuck with me since we read it.
Really?
And we read it a while ago. Remember the story about the kid who had a sleepover with a bunch of his friends? They were like part of a dance group or whatever.
Yes,
and he got up in the middle of the night and he saw the kid's mom like standing there.
It's being super weird.
And she was being super creepy. And then the kid got up and he was like, Mom, like, what are you doing? And he like got her upstairs.
And he came back all super
yeah, but he
creepy.
didn't come back down for like a couple hours. And when he came back down, he was like all zombified too. Like, that one, I think about that one a lot. Because at first I was just like, oh, this is just straight up fucking aliens. Like, they were abducted and replaced by aliens. But, like, realistically, aliens are probably really good at covering their tracks. There's no way I'm going to find, like, a bunch of details about that. But as time has gone on, I've thought about what else it could have been besides bullshit. So I present to you my topic this week, dear listener, Changelings. And
the one with Angelina Jolie, right?
My first bullet point says Changeling is a 2008 movie starring Angelina Jolie.
Dang it.
Yep, I knew you were going to fucking say that. I haven't seen it, but I assume it's okay and fairly boring in parts because that
it's really good.
You've seen it?
I've seen it. I've seen it all the way through. I think it's really good.
It never gets boring? You're telling me it never gets boring?
There's a part in it where I was like, are you freaking kidding me? This happened? It's insane.
So I know the basic premise of that movie is her kid is kidnapped and like the LAPD is like, oh snap, we found him.
There's a murder house with a bunch of murdered little boys.
And she's like, sweet. So she gets her kid back and they really just wind up handing her like a bag of sugar with children clothes on it. And they're like, you're welcome. And she's like, this isn't my kid. Is that about right?
Oh my God, no.
Okay, cool. So clearly I need to watch it. But aside from a movie, what is a changeling? Well, changelings have a few different origins. And one such origin is that a changeling is actually a fairy that is put in place of an actual child that gets snatched by other fairies. And you're probably asking yourself, why would a fairy take a human kid? And lots of thoughts come to my mind. The first one is probably not the most common to you, but I always figure when a kid is taken by a supernatural entity, it's for food. They're going to eat them. So that's just where my mind goes. But While it is said that fairies would take human children for evil purposes on occasion, it's not delved into very specifically what those things are. It just says it's usually to be subjugated, to act as a servant, which, let's be real, isn't much different than their life was going to turn out if they just grew up a normal human being. Like, I was basically my parents' bellhop until I moved out when I was 19.
Bro.
Like, no fucking joke. Like, I really felt like I used to tell them that too. Like, I feel like you guys just had kids, so you could just make me go and get shit for you all the time. Like, to make it easier for me to be contacted by them anywhere in the house when I still live there, and this is 100% true, my dad bought an intercom system. And he put intercoms in all the rooms that I would be in so that wherever they were, they could just hit a button and be like, Adam, do this.
Wow.
And that was it. I used to get buzzes at like 1 a.m. in the middle of the night because the dogs will wake up, want to go outside, and I get buzzed like, hey, let the dogs out. And I'd be in the middle of fucking sleeping. And it was just the worst thing fucking ever. Another side story. So story inside a story. I totally used those intercom systems because you could just unplug them. They weren't like mounted on the wall. And I had a bunch of friends that were having a bunch of drama at the time. And I was like, you know what? You guys should come over. Everyone should hash everything out. And like one of my friends is like, I'm totally going to get thrown under the bus. This other person is going to blame everything on me. So that's person 1. And then person 2 and 3 came over and they went down to the basement and I had an intercom down there with like the lock button on so you could hear everything they were saying. And then we stayed upstairs and listened to everything. And person 1 was totally right. Person 2 threw person 1 under the bus to person 3. And we were just sitting there, and then they went downstairs to confront them, and it was a bunch of screaming, and then he unplugged the intercom, and then everything was silent. And I thought there was a murder-suicide in my basement for a while.
Shut up.
But then everything was okay after that. But yeah, so fun stuff. Let me get back to this changeling thing. So another reason fairies would steal a child is a bit different. And there is supposedly some sort of palpable power that comes from the love of a human child. So
hello, Harry Potter.
Yeah, that's what I thought of too, but that's more about his mom. But this is the other way around. So they were stealing kids apparently to raise them lovingly, like because it would like amplify their magic or some shit. I don't know. But like while that isn't bad, I guess that fairy kid that they subbed in is just shit out of luck. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to take this human kid because like they're replacing the kid. This isn't just kidnappings. These are changelings.
No, I know, but the parents, the human parents, are going to love that little kid.
No, oh, well, that's the thing here. We're about to get into a lot of other shit. So like, that said, like, I'd like to give a moment to our listeners that daydream a lot, because I know I'm one of those people, to contemplate the possibility that you yourself may actually be a fairy. You might not even be human and you just didn't know it. Which, if True Blood has taught me anything about being a fairy, it gives you powers. Like the power to apparently fuck really hot guys all the time. Not slut shaming, just saying I watch that show a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Suki is just fucking
no. You
everybody.
Right.
Suki.
Suki.
She's just like, oh, you're hot. Let's do this thing. Not really. She's not a whore. A different origin to the changeling story.
Also, I don't think she's hot.
You really don't think she's hot?
No.
I think she's attractive. I also think she's a really good actress. A different origin in the changeling story is that trolls would actually make the swap and not fairies.
Why?
So now I know what you're probably thinking this time. They want to eat the kid. Because, I mean, that's a troll thing, right? They live under bridges. They crush you and eat your bones. And what's really weird about this theory is that the reason behind the swap isn't for the delicious child. Like, if that was the case, they'd just take the child and eat it. They wouldn't replace it with anything.
Is it so the parents will raise their kid?
They're swapping in one of their own children because they apparently believe, which is just so fucking weird to me, that receiving a human upbringing is better for their kids. And the reason they want it is because it's like it's supposed to give them a better life. So they're subbing in their kids
really
to get a better life. And as a side note, like, that is so tragically sweet of these troll parents. And this particular myth, like the changeling myth, not the troll myth. And they also say there's some other stuff about like them being elves instead of being trolls or fairies.
I've never heard the elf one before.
The elf one is actually from a Grimm Brothers fairy tale.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, there's a whole story about it, so you can actually read that where it's elves that are doing this thing. I think I get to that later in my script, in fact. But the particular myth about changelings is wrapped in Christian theology as well. So, like, the church would tell people, like, officially tell people that trolls or fairies or just evil creatures would take their children and that it was a legit thing. Like, you could go to mass and be told by your preacher, like, or your priest or whatever it is, like, hey, if you don't, and I'm dead serious, like, if you don't do what we say, like, these things are going to come and take your fucking kids. And then they would say, you know what kind of kids that trolls and fairies and elves can't take? baptized children.
Oh.
And then they would hand out the pamphlets with pricing for baptisms. And that's fucking legit. It's not like they're actually handing those out.
Baptism?
Well, like there's always a price for everything you do through the church. And like that's some questionable sales practice at the expense of trolls, because if trolls are real and that's not the case, like they could just take a baptized kid. Like I'd be like, I want a fucking refund, bro. Like I baptized my kid and now I'm stuck with this thing that only eats sheep. What the fuck? So as a side note, a big proponent of the changeling myth is none other than Martin Luther. And it's not, we don't have a religious podcast, but if you don't know that name, I advise you to Google it. He's basically a dude who led a split from the Catholic Church for questionable sales practices in the past.
Is he the one that had like 99?
He nailed him to the door of the Catholic Church. Yeah, and it was all inspired supposedly by the selling of plenary indulgences, I think is how they put it. You could basically pay enough money and you'd get a certificate that said you'll get into heaven.
Yeah.
If you gave enough money to the church. And he was like, that's bullshit. And then later on he's like, changelings are real. So I'll move on from that. There is another legend like I talked about from the Brothers Grimm. And this story in particular, it's like the swap takes place, but in the place of the child, they leave an elf. And like after, don't think like baby Legolas. It's not like this really pretty elf.
Aww.
It's not a close approximation of a human.
More like an orc?
It was like an orc. It's like ugly and like oddly shaped and always hungry, and it acts like an asshole.
So it's you.
So yeah, sure. Fuck you. I hate you. So it's weird too. Like eventually the elf, like the mom just decides like I'm just going to play with it, and she makes the elf laugh. And after a while, he's like, I'm a fucking elf. Like, he just starts talking and he admits to her he's an elf. And he's actually really old. He's not young.
What?
And, like, that's just a Grimm Brothers fairy tale, you know?
Oh.
It has, like, that macabre twist to it. And I want to read it now. So let's get back to...
I think we actually have it.
Do we?
Yeah, I have a whole book of Grimm's fairy tales.
Oh, we should totally fucking read that. That'd be a fun thing to do. So, okay. So what are some good facts? And in parentheses, I put LOL because I'm using the word facts for this.
Oh, okay.
But what are some good facts to know about your kid being at risk for this old changeling switcheroo?
Okay, if I feed my kid enough cake where he's too heavy to move.
I think it'll make him more appetizing, actually.
Really?
We're going to get to these rules, okay? And we have two different sets of rules. So it said that there's a specific type of human trait that's attractive to fairies in particular for this one. And things that are like, quote, metallic in nature. So when I read that, I'm like, so
shiny?
Like some magnetic, so Magneto, so like Michael Fassbender better watch his fucking back.
Oh my gosh.
But, or Sir Ian McKellen. But no, that's not the case. This in particular means things like blonde hair, blue eyes, gray eyes. For some reason, those represent like a metallic form of nature. And fairies love that shit, so they'll snatch them up. And it's
Legolas.
not... So Legolas, yeah, it's not limited to children. So you can have like kids? You can have adults taken too. They just prefer to take kids, probably because they're just easier to deal with, and you can raise them. And adults are just fucking all sorts of assholes. So
I believe it.
Let's say your kid is taken. How will you ever know? Well, the good people at Ranker.com have a really horrifying list that is a gathering of a bunch of stuff that they had found on the internet. And I don't mean horrifying in the scary sense, but in the man, I fucking hate human beings sense.
Oh.
So people actually believe a lot of these things, and I do more research later on, so stay with me. And they would treat their children as if they were monsters if they displayed like any of these telltale signs of being a fairy or troll or evil creature. So, and these things are fucking real. So,
oh my god,
if you think your kid could have been taken by trolls, these are the things that people were told to watch out for back in the day. And we're going to get into this a little bit deeper after this ranker list. But so the first one is birthmarks. So if your kid has a birthmark, it said they're probably evil.
That's so messed up.
I have a friend who had a sixth finger, and their grandmother told him it was a sign that they were touched by the devil.
Shut up.
That's like today. So people still believe shit like that. But this is it's a real thing. And like people actually believe this. Like most of us have heard terrible stories of infants born with birthmarks or some sort of disfiguration being regarded as broken or being discarded.
Stupid. I hate people.
This is something that's like attached to this myth too. So whether or not this is the origin of it, it's probably not. Or this is just another way people justify doing this sort of shit. This is the first one. The second one is aversion to iron. And like this one kind of makes sense to me because if you've watched Supernatural, you know you always have iron on you and salt on you. So if your kid is like freaked out by iron, people are like, okay, maybe they're evil. But the way they advised morons back in the day to check and see if their kids were changelings.
Brand them?
No, you would take a pair of iron shears as in giant fucking scissors, and you'd open them and put them in your baby's crib. And if the kid was uncomfortable around these giant fucking scissors laying next to them, they must be a changeling because they're uncomfortable next to iron.
That's the dumbest shit I've ever heard.
I was just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, you have to be the worst parent in the world to think this is something that you should actually do. And it was a telltale sign that a kid was a changeling if when you came back to it, the shears were in the sign of a cross. Like they had been moved.
That's dumb.
Yeah, they're all dumb. They get worse. So I heard this one too. And if your kid developed a left hand dominance, so if you were left-handed,
wow,
you were probably a changeling. And like, it's just bizarre to me because 10% of people are left-handed. So 10% of people had to deal with this shit.
See, side note, my dad was left-handed. He was born, well, I guess technically he's not born left-handed, but he was left-handed. And back in our motherland, they beat the heck out of his hand until he couldn't use his hand anymore to make him start using his right hand.
And you find that in history a lot, is that people viewed using your left hand as something that was wrong with you.
It makes no sense.
And then they force a correction. And the correction, when you force a correction, especially on a kid, it inhibits development in a bunch of other fucking ways.
Really?
Yeah, like if you watch the King's Speech, that was one of the things that inhibited him. And he was fucking royalty, is that he was left hand dominant. And they still believe that. They did this to a fucking prince. And they corrected him, and because of that, he developed a stutter, amongst other things that fucking guy had to go through.
Holy crap.
That was one of the reasons he developed his stutter. And, like, my dad and my brother are left-handed people. So, like, clearly I think they should all be rounded up and shot into the sun.
Shut up.
I'm kidding.
So stupid.
They talked so much shit to me growing up. Like, I was the freak because I was right-handed. And I was just like, fuck you guys. Because they were like, oh, we're special. And now you kind of know why. That they felt like they needed to defend themselves because throughout history, people would be like, you're a fucking freak.
Right.
So this is another telltale sign. So let's keep going. So if the person who has the kid suddenly has a string of bad luck, your kid might be a changeling. And this is turning into like a Jeff Foxworthy bit at this point.
So one of our dogs has to be a changeling?
Because I've had such bad luck lately? It might be. So it's just so funny because it's like, yeah, because you have a shitty life, you're going to blame your kid. Is it?
Yeah.
Why?
Because she's so cuddly lately.
She has been really nice, and she's been an asshole her whole life. So I guess I'm okay with that.
Oh.
But I'm not going to blame anyone. For me, definitely not Nymeria. Maybe God, who knows? But
what the fuck?
this one made me really mad. Actually, they said that if your baby cries all the time and can't be soothed, it's probably a changeling. It's probably evil in some way.
Instead of its own colickiness.
Yeah.
Like,
that one's just like, get fucked, dude. Babies cry. Like, I've talked to so many new parents recently, and something you have to learn as a new parent is there is going to be a point where your baby is going to cry, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it.
And people don't. I'm sure in history they were like, I'm sick of this baby crying. There's something wrong with it.
It's got to be evil. There has to be something wrong with this baby. So people would blame it. So like seeing natural things like this as signs of evil is just super fucking annoying to me. Another thing is that your newborn is eating constantly. That must be a sign that their appetite isn't actually being fed, or they have like some like unworldly thing to them. It's just bizarre shit that these people would believe this. It can't have anything to do with the fact that an infant doubles its fucking birth weight within the first 5 months of being alive.
I was a chubby baby, just saying.
And you keep going. I mean, and that's the other thing. It's like, I don't understand why these things always have to be attached to some like negative stigma. Like if your child misbehaves, you might be a changeling. So it's like, clearly I was a fucking changeling because I was an asshole as a child.
Still are.
I must be a fairy.
You must be a changeling.
I hate you. So, or your child is unusually intelligent. So people were taught to fear smart children.
That is
to be
so
wary
dumb.
around a smart child. And I think this is the last one. No, it's the second to last one. Your child is aggressive or mean. And I put on my script, finally, because like, Jesus Christ, we got one that actually might be a sign that something might be wrong with your kid. You know what I mean? Like, your kid acts like an asshole and is violent. Yeah, there might be something wrong there. But realistically, it might be that you're a shitty parent.
I just think anytime people, like, when they hurt animals, that's where I'm immediately like, there's something wrong.
There could be, I mean, these things can definitely happen, and it could not be a parent's fault whatsoever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, when you look at them like, oh, they're a monster. And you still hear that shit nowadays. When you see someone that has something wrong with them, like, they're a monster. Like, that's a phrase that people toss out. And it has origins from people actually believing these kids were monsters. And last but not least, and this one made me so fucking mad, your child is unusually withdrawn.
What?
So yeah,
like shy.
Yeah, let's treat people who are shy and feel as though they don't fit in as if they were literally fucking monsters. So just listening to these things, it made it like, there's no surprise to me at all that people still treat individuals with social disorders or mental disorders
like
or disabilities or disfigurations like they're not even fucking human. Because for such a long time, people were literally taught they might be evil. They might be a monster that replaced the person that you know and love. And people literally saw those things as signs that you were a monster and they would believe it. And why? Because people are fucking stupid.
Yeah.
Bottom line. That's the 100% truth of that. So now we've gotten into this ranker list. I was like, let's see how many of these things are things that were actually believed and actually preached. So we're going to get into some real shit. And I'm going to stick to the changeling thing, but I'm going to go through a little bit of stuff, and it needs a little bit of explanation before we get too deep into it. So I'm not trying to offend anyone, but we have to go over some of this stuff. So at this point, I will say again, we're not a religious podcast, but we go with a lot of stuff that has ties to a bunch of religious teachings. I was raised a Lutheran when I was being raised when I was a kid through the better part of my childhood. So I was quite shocked to read that the aforementioned Martin Luther, who was alive from 1483 to 1546.
Oh, is that what Lutheran is named after?
That's exactly what Lutheran's named after. He supposedly preached that children that showed signs of mental retardation or physical disfigurement were to be considered evil and killed. So I read that, I'm like, no fucking way. And then I started reading more about it, and I saw it more and more. So without going too far down into this rabbit hole, I decided to investigate on like a university level, like a PhD in philosophy type of level. And I was reading a bunch of dissertations on the debate between whether or not this was something he actually believed and or preached. So that said, this in particular is usually tied to a specific controversial event, and he was there for it. And a lot of the accountings of the event didn't even get written about until years later, and a lot of the things are very unreliable. So a lot of the things I found and read said that this source is largely unreliable.
Okay.
And at the same time when he was alive, in fact, I think it was 4 years after he was born, a particular publication came out that told everyone that was a Christian what they needed to be afraid of and what they needed to deal with. And we're going to get to that because a lot of the stuff that came out at the exact same time Martin Luther was sort of rising to power gets tied up with, oh, this is what he believed, but it's like everyone believed that at the time. So it's not just like him singling everything out and creating a church where he could like persecute mentally ill or mentally retarded or physically disfigured people. So that said, there's two sides to that argument, and if you find that really interesting, I do suggest reading some of these dissertations these people have written. They're fascinating. They get into the life of Martin Luther and the things that he actually preached about.
Man, you read a bunch today.
I did, man. I read like a 22-page dissertation, and I read another one. I didn't read all because it was like 83 pages. But there's a lot of stuff out there regarding that, and that's a different podcast. And I'm sure at some point, if you want to listen to that, there's someone out there that'll talk about the life and history of Martin Luther.
It's too much.
We're talking about changelings. So they're very closely tied together because it is very well documented that Martin Luther did preach about changelings because he thought they were real.
I had no idea.
I didn't either. So when I was doing this, I'm like, okay, let's get to the bottom of this. So let's see what the things are that they talked about, not just Martin Luther, but everyone, and why they talked about it. So now that we're past this disclaimer, let's get back to the whole changeling thing. So where this train of thought really came from was this book that I told you was published like 4 years after he was born. And that book is called The Malleus Maleficarum.
Oh, God.
Which, if you recognize that, it's probably because you've seen the Da Vinci Code.
Oh, is it from the Da Vinci Code?
That's exactly what they talk about when they talk about like what the Grail really is. But the Malleus Maleficarum, it roughly translates to the Hammer of the Witches. And it's basically a guidebook for hunting down and killing witches.
I know it from all the witch hunting TV shows and movies and shit.
They use it in everything. And it's bizarre because this thing was used for so fucking long. And it's not just witches. It's anything that could present as evil in society that you're supposed to hunt. And guess what it has a section on?
Changelings?
Fucking changelings.
Oh my
No
God,
bullshit.
Okay.
So the thing that's crazy about this is that in most cases, forward-thinking women who weren't going to take shit from overzealous pieces of trash.
Oh my God, and they were evil.
Were the ones that were targeted. And information on changelings is mentioned in this writing. So this isn't a topic about witches. I'm going to do that, and we're going to get balls deep into this thing.
Okay.
But we're going to touch the changeling part right now. So information on changelings is mentioned in this writing. And now that we've heard what Ranker has to say, what does the Hammer of Witches, a fucking document that was published in 1487, have to say? The people that read this thing from like the late 1400s almost through like the 1800s.
What?
Like,
it was like, used that long?
Yeah, and it was used longer in the West than it was in Europe too, which is just fucking bizarre. So as a quick side note, before I get into all that, it's published in 1487, I mentioned that. And you think witch hunts, right? And these are going on all over the world when you think that. And I was thinking about that. I'm like, every time I used to think witch hunts, I used to think Dark Ages. It's got to be the Dark Ages is when they were killing all these innocent women, right? No. The Dark Ages were from 400 to 800 AD. You know what took place from around the end of the 1300s, middle of the 1300s through the 1700s? The fucking Renaissance took place during that time.
Oh,
and
wow.
like you think of the Renaissance, and it's this supposed period of time where like
Enlightenment. And
Enlightenment and this forward thought moved the world forward. The Age of Enlightenment's an actual age that took place at like the end of the 1700s.
Really?
And that's like something that came.
Today.
That's like something that came from the Renaissance, but. Like, it sounds great, and it's just super romantic to hear about, except that fucking worldwide witch hunts and mass hysteria started in 1450 during the Renaissance, and so many fucking women were killed during this time. Women and the mentally retarded and the physically disfigured.
It's like Sparta type thing.
They still act. And that's what I thought of, too, 300 at the beginning where he's judging the kid to see if he's going to throw him in the pit. That's the type of shit that was fucking encouraged by people. And they would tell you, like, if your kid was okay and now is not okay, it's a fucking changeling.
Wow.
So this stuff is horrible. So let's see what horrible stuff is in the Malleus Maleficarum on Changeling. This is a fucking quote. So another terrible thing which God permits to happen to men is when their own children are taken away from women and strange children are put in their place by devils. So just starting out, the man is the victim. It's the fault of the woman. And it's being put in there by the devil. This was translated in 1928. So I have fucking like citations for all this shit. The book also suggested there's 3 different types of changelings that exist. The first one says, quote, "For some are always ailing and crying, and yet the milk of 4 women is not enough to satisfy them." So they're always crying and they're always hungry. So we see that develop throughout time. That's still a rule that you see on fucking Rancor. The second kind of changeling is supposedly a child that is born after the woman is impregnated by, quote, "a team of devils."
What?
And it's like some weird ritual that they perform. It's like an artificial insemination. But again, the fucking woman's to blame here. And the third kind
So
is
that's
that...
like if the woman gets raped and she's not married or anything and she has a fucking kid.
No, it's not even like that. It's like she's sleeping and the fucking devils show up and they put a fucking demon in her baby. But it's her fault because she's like a weak of character human being who would like allow that to happen
but like
to her.
what would actually happen is she had a kid out of wedlock and that's why they're saying
Probably.
like it's like...
And they'd still blame her for it.
It's so stupid.
So there's the third type of changeling. The third kind is that there were actually devils that were pretending to be children. So your child was taken away and what's there is an actual devil.
It's a fucking demon or something.
So think like Omen, but instead of being like the devil's kid, it's just a devil. So the book even attempts, which this is bizarre to me because this is written in like 1487. So the book attempts to answer a question that people ask all the time. When bad stuff happens, people say...
FAQ in the book?
Yeah, it's like an FAQ. But people say stuff like this, and you hear people say this still. Why would God let bad things happen? Why do bad things happen to good people? And that question, they knew people were going to ask that, so they put a part in there. And there's 2 reasons about this. One reason is that parents dote too much on their kid. You're paying too much attention to your kid. And if you do that, quote, "it is for their own good that they undergo divine punishment."
What?
So God allows the devil to take your kid and be replaced with something evil because you're giving your kid too much attention.
That's the stupidest shit.
The other is that such things, this one made me so mad, such things happen to women who are very superstitious and are in many ways seduced by devils. So
you're making us superstitious by printing this stupid book.
The next fucking thing I put in all caps, I put the fucking textbook for hunting and killing witches literally blames women for being too superstitious and allowing evil into their fucking home. It's bizarre bullshit. I know. This is crazy shit. And this is all related to changelings very specifically. So did the whole changeling thing come from the Malleus Maleficarum? Well, no. I mean, like, good God, no. This has been around for longer than that. That's why it was such a common thought. They were able to just put it in their handbook about hunting and killing evil things.
Do you think the world would be completely different if the roles were reversed and everything was like... it's men's fault?
I think it would be 100% different.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of things would change if you just changed the slightest thing. That would be one of the biggest things you could change, and the world would be completely different. There's no doubt about it. But let me get back to changelings.
Okay.
So there are variations of this myth all over the world, and this book just made it much, much more dark. And like it had to, because it's literally giving you instructions and excuses at the same time on how to literally murder women and children.
Wow.
So you have to make them evil. Like that's what you have to do. They have to be the bad guys. So instead of being like super dark and continuing through this path that we've been on for a little while, let's look at some other places and how they handled the changeling myth.
Okay.
One in particular, and it's funny because everything over in Europe is very closely related, but Isle of Man, which we've talked about before, we've covered that before. Sam's from there. Like they have very specific stories regarding changelings as well. And there's a story in the Manx Fairy Tales, which came out in 1911, about a changeling. And that story is called, and I hope I get this right, The Fairy Child of Close Ni Lahai. I think I fucked up that last one.
She'll let us know.
She will. And this kid gets like swapped with a fairy who's loud and an asshole, which we see that a lot. So like that's a common thing, but it's not super evil and they don't blame the fucking mom.
Okay.
So there are other tales as well. There's one from a guy named George Waldron who stayed there in the early 1700s, I think. And this is again Isle of Man. And his story that he wrote is about a family who had a newborn. And when he was shown the newborn, it was this perfectly beautiful baby, but would like make a super pissed off face if you brought up anything about elves or fairies around it, like it was offended. What? And there's a lot of really weird details about this.
Is it a troll and that's why it's offended?
No, it's like if you're talking bad about elves or fairies.
Oh, I see.
It's like you're talking bad about its people. So he thought it was a changeling. And then the neighbors would always like peek into the windows because even though the kid was very pretty, it didn't care for the company of human beings.
Okay.
It didn't want to be around people. But if it was by itself, it would act like it was playing. It would be super happy when it was by itself, like it wasn't alone. Like it was playing with something. So the neighbors
like
are super
fairies.
creeped out by the kid. And the other thing that they put in there, and this is a really weird detail, is that at any time if the kid got dirty and you left him in his crib or you left him in the room alone and you left and came back, he was perfectly clean.
Shut up.
He was perfectly clean. His hair was done. He looked perfect. And I put down self-cleaning baby.
That's the best.
Sign me the fuck up. So
how do I pay for this service?
Right? And then in other places, there's stories about changelings. So this is where it gets really good. This is my favorite part. So in Ireland, and there's a lot of other places I didn't get to cover, so that'll be in Changeling Part 2 when I eventually do that. But in Ireland, changelings were believed to be swapped out for children, just like the normal myth. And the idea behind what attracted the fairy in this case was a woman in transition. It's like a newly married woman or a new mom. So these were more or less warnings to people to watch out for it than they were blaming the victim here.
Okay.
So doting on an infant too much, we see that one come up again, and now you know exactly where it's from. And a child being born to, quote, beautiful parents or very healthy parents, like physical specimens. It's like you're looking for like livestock, you know, and you want the best and the most beautiful or like the strongest.
Oh, that's so sad.
So this is something that would like attract a changeling. So the other part of this story that is different from the other changeling things that we've always seen is that there's child fairies. And I mentioned that one story where that fairy was like, I'm just an old dude.
Yeah.
And the idea in Ireland is that it's extremely old fairies that are being swapped out. So they're taking the kid.
Why?
They're giving you one of their elderly because if it's moved into the human world, it can die.
Oh, no.
So it's just sad all around, right?
But then, yeah, because you're like, oh, my kid fucking died.
Yeah. So, and that's another sign, too, is that your kid gets sick. Like your kid gets really sick and you don't know why. It's because it's an old changeling. So it's nicer than the previous myth, right? It's not that horrible. Well,
it's still horrible.
Not always is it a good thing. And I'm going to get into a very specific case of changeling, which some of you out there might have heard of. So people largely believed in changelings over in Ireland. I shouldn't say largely. It's mostly the rural areas where people were more, superstitious and things like that, especially the women. But just kidding. Please don't kill me.
Shut up.
They even believed in this shit up until the late 1800s, which is crazy to think because some of you have great-grandparents out there who were alive around the same time. People were finally starting to not believe in changelings.
Really?
Yeah. And it eventually started to fade. And one of the reasons it started to fade is what we're about to get into. So there was a woman named Bridget Cleary or Clary.
Okay.
Who was born in 1869.
Can you try and say it in an Irish accent?
No, I won't do that. I won't offend all of our Irish friends out there.
Dang it.
So she's very notable in the world of changelings, and I'm going to get into why. So she lived a very normal life, and she met a man in 1887, which would be when she was, I believe, 18. His name was Michael Cleary. And as you probably have guessed, because they have the same last name, no, they were not related. They fell in love, and they got married.
All right.
She took his name, and that's why that's her last name. So that's when things got a little bit weird. So when they met, Michael was a cooper. And before you ask me, that's someone who makes like wooden casks or barrels or vats or buckets or all sorts of shit where you basically shape wood.
Okay.
So that's what he did. When she met him, she worked as a dressmaker's apprentice. So it was a profession that was viewed as suitable for women. And then they got married. And for whatever reason, she moved back home to live with her parents when they got married. And Michael stayed put where he was, continuing to be a cooper.
That's really
She
weird.
was no longer a dressmaker's assistant, but she was like a kept woman. So she went home. And it's like they didn't get a house right away where they could live together. But these are kind of irrelevant details, so I didn't dig too deep on timing on this one. So what did she do when she moved home? Well, she got herself a flock of chickens. And what do chickens do? Well, they poop out eggs. I'm pretty sure that's how their insides work. That's actually their poop. But who knows?
You're so stupid.
And she sold those eggs because why the fuck wouldn't you? There was a lot of eggs. She had a lot of chickens. And because of that, she made money. And because she was making money, she became an entrepreneur.
And then she's making money, so he's like, women shouldn't be making money.
Well, it was not a normal acceptable job for a woman at the time. And so she was making so much money. And I think this detail is awesome. She bought herself a sewing machine. And she bought herself like a really fucking nice top of the line sewing machine. And which in the late 1800s is some fancy shit. And she became a dressmaker and a milliner. Pretty sure I said that right. I knew you were going to ask that. It's someone who makes hats. You design and you create hats. So she could make you a dress and a hat.
She's a Mad Hatter.
No, she's not mad. She didn't work with Mercury. So she's kind of fucking awesome, right? She got married. She decided to start her life over. And instead of being an apprentice, now she's a dressmaker, a milliner. I think I'm saying that right. And she still raises chickens and sells eggs.
What does Mercury have to do with the Mad Hatter?
I mean, like when you made hats, it always had a buckle on it. So hatters would melt down buckles all the time, and they were made of mercury. And the fumes from mercury will literally give you psychosis, and it becomes permanent if you work with it too much.
That's why he's called the Mad Hatter?
I mean, that's a phrase, like as mad as a hatter. And
Holy
that's where
crap.
it came from. You're welcome. You're learning so much today.
Oh my gosh, this is like Education City.
Well, you're welcome. But anyway, so she's fucking cool, right? She's a badass. So she gets this idea that they need to be together, and he moves in. And I will say that in the 8 years of marriage up to this point, he didn't really get threatened by this. He wasn't pissed off. She was making money, and for everything that I could find, he was totally fucking cool with that. He was like, cool, she's making money, I have my job, she lives with her parents, eventually
It's like you guys can afford fancy things.
he moves in. Yeah, and I don't think there was any problems with the marriage at all. And I couldn't find anything in the story about this. And there's a lot of stories about this. So 8 years into this marriage, Bridget's mom passes away, which is sad.
Oh, that's super sad.
And her dad is still around, and he's very old, which means now they have to take care of her dad.
Okay.
So now as a side note, at some point he moved in with her. We went over that, and we're not exactly sure when this happened. But the dad was a laborer when he was young. So they're living in the dad's house. They're living in the parents' house still. And they realized when they were taking care of him that because his dad was a laborer and neither of them were, he is entitled to live in a laborer house. It's weird. It's like there's houses for taking care of people when they're older if you're a laborer. And there was one nearby that was abandoned and no one wanted to live there, and it was nice. So they're like, well, if he's entitled to it, we're fucking moving in.
Okay.
Well, the reason no one wanted to live there is because it was supposedly inhabited by fairies. And in Ireland, they're called fairy ring forts. And people straight up believed enough that fairy ring forts were real, that there are supernatural places where fairies gathered, and people would not live in this particular house.
How do they know?
I don't know. I don't. Like, there's certain, like, formations of rocks or stone that are supposed to let you know, like, to stay the fuck away. But Michael and Bridget were like, fuck that. Let's do this shit. This house is nice. So they did. They fucking moved in. They moved in late 1894, from what I can tell. By March of 1895, so maybe a few months later.
Did he go crazy?
She was super sick. Actually, she got super sick. So it's not exactly what you think. She got ill, and the doctor came out, and the doctor was like, yo, dog, you got bronchitis. But it's 1895, so here's a rock. I guess swallow some shit, and hopefully you get better. I'm just fucking kidding.
Okay,
he didn't give
I
a
was
rock.
like, what?
They had actual medicine, and he did give it to her. So he came back, and these dates are 100% legit. He came back on March 13th, 1895 to check, and shocker, she was really fucking sick now. So he did what doctors apparently do in 1895 when you go from sick to really sick. He just went and got a priest to administer her last rites. So friends and family came by to say goodbye and to pray, do all the shit you do when you think someone's going to pass.
Yeah.
But people still do this too, and people did it back then. They brought with them home remedies, things they thought would help the person get better. Like, I'm sure her mom came in and turned on a diffuser with a bunch of essential oils in it. And as a side note, I put, it probably would have cured her. But they also tried some homebrewed rituals. And for the life of me, no matter how much I searched, I could not find what these were in particular. But when they were done with their homebrewed rituals, her father and her husband were convinced that she was a changeling. That the sick woman in front of them was not Bridget. It was a fairy who had been swapped in. And they did what any father or husband would do in their situation once you believe that. They pissed in jars and they threw it on her.
No way.
Then they put her in front of the fireplace so the fairy would leave.
No way.
These are the rumors about what they did to her. And this sounds like an R. Kelly album or some shit.
Ew.
It's just fucking weird.
It's not funny.
So March 16th, 3 days later, people are talking in town, and there's rumors that this happened. There's rumors that she's missing. No one knows what the fuck is going on, so people are stopping by to check in on her.
But
and
she's there.
She's not there.
What?
People stopped by 3 days later, like, is Bridget okay? And there's like, she's not here anymore. So the police came by. And the police were like, yo, dog, where the fuck is Bridget? And Michael told the fucking police the fairies took her.
What
and he had a vigil to Bridget set up in his house. And on March 22nd, after much searching, the police discovered the burnt corpse of Bridget Cleary in a shallow grave near the home. So in all, 9 people wound up being charged in the disappearance and death of Bridget Cleary, and every single one of them claimed that she was a fucking changeling and that the real Bridget was still out there somewhere. So I found some really good details on the actual trial that took place in Ireland over this shit. So in all, 9 people were indicted on charges of wounding, which is just harming another human being.
9 people.
9 of the 9 were indicted on wounding. 5 of the 9 were indicted on murder. And I know some of you are like,
5 people get indicted on murder?
Because she fucking died and it was their fault.
Like, okay, so did they all like stab her or something?
No, we're gonna get to it. Okay, so I know some of you legal buffs are like, an indictment isn't a conviction. And for those of you who don't know, indictment means there's enough evidence to charge you formally. Conviction means you've been found guilty of that charge.
Okay.
So these people were all brought to trial. There was a 10th. They were like, oh, this person didn't have anything to do with it. They're probably just walking by and tie their shoe. It's the super, there's the person that basically was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they finally let him go. So this trial is super interesting, and it's kind of historic. So what came out of this trial is this story, which wound up being corroborated by so many of these people, including Michael himself. And the doctor came by on March 13th, and she was worse. And he asked Michael, has she been taking her medicine? And Michael said, nope, I don't believe in that stuff. He
it's his fucking fault.
Flat out told the doctor, I don't believe in medicine. So she had gotten significantly worse. They got the priest. According to the priest, who also testified at trial, Michael Cleary told him, quote, people may have some remedy of their own that might do more good than doctor's medicine. So he had an idea in mind of how he was going to fix Bridget. So he gave her communion, the priest did, and then he just fucking got out of the house. You know, he's like, I don't know what's going on, but there's something really wrong here. So then the neighbors come over that night, March 13th, and they're concerned. And an argument ensued in the home with all these people there. And guess what it's about? Fairies. That's what they talked about. And during this argument, all the parties involved, regardless of what side they're on, stated that Bridget told Michael during this argument, when he was accusing her of being a changeling, that the only person who had been carried away by these fairies was his mother, which is so weird. I got cold chills just reading it again. It's just like, no, your mom got carried away by the fairies. So it's like either it's a demented mind talking because she's sick, or maybe it's a dying woman who's laying there and her husband's being a dick, like, you're a fairy. And she's like, psh, your mom's a fairy. Or she just throws it back in his face.
Or she's a fairy and is telling him, like, yeah, we fucking took your mom, bitch.
So, I mean, if that's the case, then you probably think Michael's a hero for what's about to happen. So what happened after that? Michael tried to feed her. He wanted to give her food. Just food, dude.
Okay.
So she refused. She wasn't going to fucking eat. So he tried to force feed her, and she resisted. So he threw her on the fucking ground, out of her bed, dragged her around, threw her down, and apparently she landed near the fireplace.
Okay.
And he pulled out a flaming log to threaten her, and when he did that, the smock she was wearing caught on fire. And to help the situation, he threw lantern oil on her.
Oh, my goodness.
Obviously, I'm just kidding. He wasn't trying to help. He threw lantern oil on her, and he literally told everyone after that, she's a fairy, let her burn. So these people all watched her die.
Everyone in her home.
Everyone in the home that was arguing whether or not she's a fairy or not, they all watched her die. And this is fucked up. So the jury found him guilty of manslaughter, not murder. Those are different charges.
Wow.
He served 15 years in prison.
Only 15?
Yeah, I know, right? For killing his wife. And people after the fact, like after she's actually known as the last witch to be burned alive in Ireland.
Really?
People tell this story and they act like she's a witch because there's just a bunch of like misconceptions around this, which is just like bizarre to me. And like, I think that's more of a rural thing. I think at this point it's been cleared up that this is what actually happened, but it did generate a debate within the public, which is hard to do in the 1890s because it's not like you can just go to your phone or put on a news station. Like
go to the internet.
Right. People are talking about this shit amongst themselves. And that debate that they started talking about.
Word of mouth just gets insane.
Yeah. And what they were talking about within the public was how people handle superstitions and how credible it all was. And basically whether or not it's bullshit.
I'm sure people have written papers and papers and papers.
Oh, yeah. And they were starting to do this. And this is legit. And the thing is, the belief in this thing was so palpable. Even in 1895, the court accepted the defense that was going to be used for all 9 defendants. And that defense was they were never trying to hurt Bridget. They were all convinced she was inhabited by an evil spirit, which meant that it would be okay if they could prove it. That's
If they could
18.
prove
That's
it.
1895. This is like 120 fucking years ago, and they're trying to prove in a court of law like she was a fucking fairy, Your Honor. It's okay that we
How are
burned
you
her to
gonna
death.
prove it?
So there's no way to do it, and like everything they bring up is like she was herself, and you fucking killed her. So it's bizarre that this was the actual defense that they were gonna have. This may be old news to some of you that live in Ireland or nearby it or have heard of this before, because there's apparently an Irish nursery rhyme.
What?
About
I want to know.
this.
I want to know. I want to
And
know.
in the Irish nursery rhyme, it has the phrase, "Are you a witch? Are you a fairy? Are you the wife of Michael Clary?"
Oh my God, I got shivers, dude.
Because like it's just bizarre that it's still so much wrapped up in this superstition.
Oh my God, I literally chills.
So
Chills.
this is about the end of it, at least the end of the first part. So
Okay.
what it comes down to is, are changelings real? And what I put down is, who the fuck knows? But what is known is that for a very, very, very long time, people 110% they believe they were. Why do I say 110%?
Why?
Because I imagine you have to be 10% over 100% if you're going to kill women and children.
Okay.
Or sons and daughters and wives. And I'm sure if you dig deep enough, husbands too were taken and considered fucking changelings. Like replacements for like the people they actually were. Or maybe there are changelings out there and some people have been replaced. What's fucking
Sleeping
crazy
agents.
is in
Sleeper
so...
agents?
Sure. Splinter cells. In so many of these things, it's just like the lore behind why they're switching them out is so that they can live a human life. It's not like malicious.
Yeah.
And there is some stuff out there that says they're evil spirits, which kind of changes it. And I think of the trolls when I think of that. So if this is all real and there are changelings and the trolls are swapping out their kids to be human children and to live human lives, they're doing it so they can live a better life, which means that their world must be pretty fucking awful.
Right.
If they're willing to send their kids to the human
Well, I'm
world
sure-
where this sort of shit happens to human beings. Because why would you ever want to send someone to live life as a human
Aw,
where this
that's
shit could
true.
happen to you? It's just so tragically sad. And so many of these things have happened throughout time. And I understand the idea behind a lot of the mythologies where it's like, this is something that replaced someone you know. And I really wanted to do the idea of maybe the person that's sitting next to you right now isn't the person who you think is sitting next
Oh
to
my
you right
God,
now.
shut up.
And that's the idea that I picked with changelings. And then the more I read about it, it's like the idea of changelings has been around for a long time. And like a lot of things, they took that palpable fear, that fear that I wanted to read about and scare people during Spooktober,
Yeah.
whatever we're calling it. Like that's the fear that people used to convince other people to kill people they knew. And that's the
So
truth. That's the truth
crazy.
about a lot of the stuff you heard tonight about changelings. Is whether or not they're real, you really don't know. And what it comes down to is the most documented stuff you can find is that people were brainwashed into thinking anyone who had a specific set of skills or deformities or disorders, they should be killed because they must be changelings. So if
Liam
they
Neeson.
exist...
He's got a certain set of skills.
I hate you so much. So if they exist, I don't know. Who the fuck knows? But in the end, I think the real monster here is the human being.
Yeah,
After going through all
we
this.
are monsters.
So that's everything I have for changelings.
That was really good. I liked it.
I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know it's kind of long, but you guys always say like, it's okay if it's long. We like the long ones. So you're welcome, I guess. But
Okay.
right on. So I guess I'll go ahead and wrap us up. I want to give a shout out to our spooky producer, Connor. Thank you so much for donating on Patreon. If you guys want to check out the tiers and see how you can become a spooky producer, you can go over to patreon.com/scarishpodcast. Tiers start as low as $1. And for $1 a month, you can get early access to all of our episodes plus Patreon exclusive content. If you want to do a one-time donation and not a monthly donation, you can do
Ko-fi.com/scarishpodcast.
which is spelled ko-fi.com/scarishpodcast. I think you guys know how to spell that, so I hope so. And then you can check us out on all our social media sites. If you want to email us, you can email storytime@scarish.com. Social media is our facebook.com/scarishpodcast. Instagram is @scarishpodcast. Twitter is @scarishpod. And I think that's just about all the stuff we have. If you want to watch us record story times live, they are usually Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time on twitch.tv/scarishpodcast or youtube.com/scarish.
Cool.
So that's the end of episode 45. So we hope you guys enjoyed it. And Robin, go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later this week. Bye.